Okay, common types of bonds. We have government bonds, which includes municipal bonds. Those are issued by state and local governments. The one key difference, let me get my one I'm trying to write here and my pen doesn't want me to. There we go. The municipal bonds, again, issued by state and local governments, they are tax exempt. So for example, a state of Texas bond, if you bought that, you would not pay federal income tax on on that. You also, if Texas had an income tax, you wouldn't pay state income tax on it as well. Treasury bonds are issued by the U.S. Treasury. They are exempt from local taxes. Corporate bonds, just bonds issued by corporations, they can be of varying degrees of quality. We'll talk about ratings here in a little bit. Mortgage bonds. A mortgage bond is a bond backed by fixed assets. That can be any type of asset. We think most people, when we think of mortgages, we think of home loans. But there are also loans that are securitized loans that are backed by car loans, equipment, so forth. So it can be many different types of things. A debenture is unsecured bond. A subordinate debenture is a bond that has claim on assets that is below the senior debt. So the senior debt holders get paid first. And that's in the event of a liquidation, but it's also on an annual basis. The corporation is required to make payments to the senior debt holders before they pay the subordinate debt holders. Common types of corporate bonds: income bonds. The income bond is a bond that only pays interest if the firm earns a certain level of income. A puttable bond is a bond that can be redeemed at the bondholder's option. So the firm, it can be based on some action by the firm, but it can also, some bonds are just puttable, meaning that if the investor doesn't want to hold it anymore, they can put them back to the company. Also index or purchasing power bonds, of bonds with interest payments that are based on an inflation index, helps protect the bond holder from inflation. I don't know a specific example here, but the U.S. Treasury issues what are called TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities. Those are an example of an index bond. Floating rate bonds, the bond rate floats with market interest rates rather than with the inflation rate. Floating rate bonds, typically the value of those bonds do not fluctuate very much because for the most part, they trade at par because the interest rate floats, and the changes in interest rates are what affects the valuation of bonds. So other debt interest instruments, zero coupon bonds that pay no annual interest, they are sold at a deep discount to par. Junk bonds are high yield or high risk bonds generally used to finance mergers and acquisitions, leverage buyouts, troubled companies. Historically, prior to the 1980s, junk bonds were companies, what we called them were fallen angels. They were companies that had declined in quality, fallen out of favor, so forth. Then in the high yield market for directed at mergers and acquisitions, buyouts, so forth, that was developed in the 80s, so forth. Bond contract features. All bonds, for the most part, have an indenture, which is a formal agreement between the issuer of a bond and the holders. The trustee A trustee is put in place. The trustee ensures that the bondholder's interests are protected and the terms of the indenture are followed. Restrictive covenant is a provision of a debt contract that constrains the actions of the borrower. A common restricted covenant would be what's called a additional bonds test to require the issuer to meet certain conditions before issuing any additional debt. A call provision is a provision that allows the issuer to redeem bonds under specified terms prior to a normal maturity date. Many times that comes with a premium. You have homework problems where there is a call premium, where the call premium is compensation to the holder for purchasing that bond with the call provision. Refunding is retiring of any existing bond using proceeds of a newly issued bond. For the most part, this is done when interest rates fall. Sometimes it's done for restructuring. A sinking fund is a required annual payment designed to pay off bond or also preferred stock. The firms can handle sinking funds in two ways. They call the bonds for based on a percentage of the bonds each year, or they can buy them in the open market. Sometimes they'll buy them if they're cheaper to buy in the open market. Convertible bonds permits the bondholder to convert the bond into shares of common stock at a fixed price. Conversion is one way. The investors cannot convert the stock back to bonds afterwards. So, great. We'll start the next lecture talking about foreign debt instruments.